You spend sleepless nights planning every step of your life, forcing doors that refuse to open and blaming yourself when things do not turn out as you expected. But there is a truth that Buddhist monks have understood for thousands of years that will completely change the way you see your struggles. When you stop trying to control everything and learn to trust the natural flow of life, something extraordinary happens. The right opportunities begin to appear effortlessly. The relationships that are meant for you arrive without you having to chase them, and that peace you have been searching for finally settles in your chest. The problem was never that you were not trying hard enough. The problem was always that you were swimming against the current of life itself. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from what part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let us begin. There is a profound truth whispered through the centuries by Buddhist masters, a truth that holds the power to transform your entire relationship with life itself. This truth is both simple and revolutionary. If something is truly meant for you, it will arrive naturally, not through force, not through desperate grasping, not through anxiety or control. It will come to you the way dawn comes to the earth, the way rivers flow to the ocean, the way breath enters your lungs without effort or strain. This is not passive resignation. This is the deepest wisdom about how life actually works, about how the universe orchestrates its infinite intelligence in ways that your small mind cannot possibly comprehend. In the mountains of ancient Tibet, there lived a young monk who was consumed with desire for enlightenment. He meditated for hours upon hours, pushing himself to the edge of exhaustion. He studied every text, memorized every teaching, performed every ritual with meticulous precision. Yet the peace he sought remained elusive, always just beyond his grasp. One day, frustrated and despairing, he approached his master and confessed his struggle. The master listened quietly, then led the young monk to the monastery garden, where a magnificent lotus flower was just beginning to open its petals to the morning sun. The master asked, "Tell me, did this lotus achieve its beauty through effort? Did it force its petals open? Did it anxiously worry about whether it would bloom?" The young monk looked at the flower, really looked at it for the first time, and something shifted deep within his understanding. The lotus had simply followed its nature. It had received what it needed from the soil, the water, the sun. It had trusted the process of its own unfolding. And in that trust, in that surrender to its own nature, it had become exactly what it was meant to be. This story illuminates something that most of us spend our entire lives resisting. We live in a culture that glorifies striving, pushing, forcing, making things happen through sheer will and determination. We are taught that if we want something badly enough, we must chase it, grasp it, control every variable, manipulate every circumstance. We are conditioned to believe that surrender is weakness, that letting go is giving up, that trust in natural unfolding is naive foolishness. But the Buddhist masters understood something that modern life has forgotten. There is a profound intelligence at work in the universe, an intelligence that orchestrates the movement of galaxies and the growth of flowers with equal precision. And you are not separate from this intelligence. You are an expression of it. When you align yourself with this natural flow, when you trust in the organic unfolding of your life, something miraculous happens. What is meant for you begins to arrive with an ease that seems almost magical. Opportunities appear that you could never have engineered through planning, connections form that you could never have forced through networking, solutions emerge that you could never have figured out through analysis. This is not because you become passive or stop taking action. This is because your actions become aligned with the deeper current of life rather than fighting against it. Think about your own life for a moment. Reflect on the things that have brought you the most genuine joy, the deepest satisfaction, the truest sense of rightness. Perhaps it was a relationship that began with an unexpected encounter. Maybe it was a career opportunity that emerged from a chance conversation. It could have been a moment of insight that arrived when you finally stopped trying to figure everything out. These gifts came to you not through force, but through openness. They arrived when you were ready to receive them, not necessarily when you thought you wanted them. There is a beautiful teaching in Buddhism about the difference between desire and readiness. Desire is the grasping mind that sees something it wants and immediately begins to scheme about how to obtain it. Desire creates tension, anxiety, a sense of lack. It looks at what you don't have and creates suffering from that absence. Readiness, on the other hand, is a state of open receptivity. It is the soil that has been prepared to receive the seed. It is the space that has been cleared to welcome the new. Readiness doesn't grasp or chase. It simply remains open, trusting that what is meant to arrive will arrive when the conditions are right. In a monastery in ancient China, there was a monk who desperately wanted to become the master's successor. He competed with the other monks, tried to impress the master with his knowledge, positioned himself to be noticed. Despite all his efforts, he was not chosen. Instead, the master selected a quiet monk who had never sought recognition, who had simply devoted himself to serving others with genuine compassion. When asked why he had made this choice, the master explained that the chosen monk had prepared himself inwardly. He had cultivated the qualities that make a true teacher, not because he wanted the position, but because he wanted to serve. The position found him because he had become ready for it, not because he had chased it. This principle applies to every area of your life. The love you seek will find you when you have become the kind of person who is ready for genuine partnership, not when you desperately grasp at anyone who might fill the void of loneliness. The career that will fulfill you will emerge when you have developed your skills and clarified your purpose, not when you frantically apply to every opportunity out of fear and scarcity. The peace you long for will settle into your heart when you stop fighting reality and learn to embrace what is, not when you've finally arranged all external circumstances to match your preferences. But here is where most people struggle. They confuse natural unfolding with passive waiting. They think that trusting in what's meant to be means sitting on the couch, doing nothing, and expecting the universe to deliver everything they want. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of detachment. True detachment doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means you stop attaching your peace, your worth, your sense of being okay to specific outcomes. It means you act from inspiration rather than desperation, from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear. Imagine a farmer planting seeds in the spring. He takes action. He prepares the soil, plants the seeds, waters them, removes the weeds. But he doesn't stand over the seeds anxiously demanding that they grow faster. He doesn't dig them up every day to check on their progress. He doesn't lie awake at night worrying about whether they're growing properly. He has done his part, and then he trusts in the natural intelligence of the seed, the soil, the sun, and the rain to do their parts. His actions are necessary, but his trust is equally necessary. This combination of purposeful action and peaceful surrender is the essence of living in alignment with what the Buddhists call the Tao, the natural way of things. There was once a woman who wanted a child more than anything in the world. She tried everything modern medicine could offer. She visited healers, followed every protocol, optimized every variable. Yet month after month, disappointment arrived instead of the baby she longed for. The stress of trying was consuming her life, damaging her health, straining her marriage. Finally, exhausted and heartbroken, she made a decision. She would stop trying so hard. She would do what she could, but she would release the outcome. She would learn to find peace and meaning in her life exactly as it was. Within 6 months of this inner shift, she conceived naturally. The baby that had eluded her desperate grasping arrived when she opened her hands and her heart. This is not a promise that everything you want will magically appear if you just let go. That would be spiritual manipulation, another form of trying to control outcomes. The deeper truth is this: when you release your death grip on specific outcomes, you create space for life to surprise you with what you actually need, which is often different from what you think you want. Sometimes what arrives is exactly what you hoped for, but transformed by timing into something even more perfect than you could have imagined. Sometimes what arrives is completely different, and you discover that your original desire was based on limited understanding of what would actually bring you joy. The Buddhist concept of detachment is often misunderstood in Western culture. People think it means not caring, becoming cold or indifferent, giving up on dreams and desires. This couldn't be further from the truth. Detachment means caring deeply about life while holding your preferences lightly. It means having dreams and working toward them while remaining open to the possibility that life might have something even better in store. It means engaging fully with your experience while not demanding that reality conform to your limited vision of how things should be. Think of a river flowing toward the ocean. The river doesn't stop flowing because it encounters a boulder. It doesn't fight against the boulder or demand that the boulder move. It simply flows around it, finding the path of least resistance while never losing sight of its ultimate destination. Sometimes the boulder redirects the river in a way that creates even more beauty, perhaps a waterfall or a peaceful pool. The river's flexibility, its willingness to adapt while maintaining its essential nature, allows it to reach its destination while creating beauty along the way. You are like this river. Your life has a natural direction, a flow that is uniquely yours. When you try to force your way through obstacles, when you rigidly demand that life follow your predetermined path, you create struggle and suffering. But when you maintain your direction while remaining flexible about the route, when you trust that detours might actually be shortcuts in disguise, you flow through life with grace and ease. What is meant for you finds you because you're not so rigidly locked into one narrow vision that you miss it when it arrives in unexpected packaging. In another ancient story, a merchant set out on a journey to a distant city where he planned to make his fortune. He had a detailed map, a specific route, a clear timeline, but as he travelled, a storm forced him to take shelter in a small village. He was frustrated by the delay, anxious about his timeline, resentful of the interruption. But while waiting for the storm to pass, he happened to meet a master craftsman whose work was unlike anything he had ever seen. They formed a partnership that brought the merchant wealth far beyond what he had imagined. The delay that had seemed like an obstacle was actually the doorway to his destiny, but he would have missed it entirely if he had been so fixated on his original plan that he couldn't recognize the opportunity presenting itself. This is how life works when you understand the principle of natural arrival. You hold your intentions and desires with an open hand. You take action from a place of clarity and inspiration. You prepare yourself to receive what you're asking for by becoming the kind of person who is ready for it. And then you trust. You trust that timing is working in your favor even when it doesn't feel like it. You trust that what appears to be a delay might actually be protection or preparation. You trust that what seems like a rejection might actually be redirection towards something more aligned with your true path. The practice of this trust is not always easy, especially in the beginning. Your conditioned mind has been trained to believe that you must control, manipulate, and force outcomes. Your ego wants to take credit for everything good that happens and defend against everything it perceives as threatening. Your fear whispers that if you let go of control, everything will fall apart. But these are the voices of illusion. The truth, as the Buddhist masters have taught for millennia, is that you never had control in the first place. You have been trying to control an ocean with a teaspoon, trying to direct the wind with your breath, trying to manage a mystery with your small and limited understanding. What you do have is choice. You can choose how you respond to what life brings. You can choose whether to meet each moment with resistance or acceptance, with fear or love, with grasping or openness. You can choose to prepare yourself inwardly so that you're ready to recognize and receive what's meant for you when it arrives. You can choose to act from inspiration rather than desperation. These choices are your real power, far more potent than any illusion of control. As you sit with these words, as you allow them to settle into your awareness, notice what resistance might be arising. Perhaps part of you is thinking about something specific you want, and you're wondering how letting go could possibly help you obtain it. Perhaps you're afraid that natural unfolding means you'll never get what you want. Perhaps you're confused about the difference between trusting the process and giving up on your dreams. These responses are natural. They arise from years of conditioning in a culture that worships control and instant gratification. But beneath these surface reactions, something deeper in you recognizes the truth of what you're reading. This deeper part of you knows that the times you've been happiest, most fulfilled, most alive, have been the times when you stopped fighting and started flowing, when you released your grip and allowed life to move through you rather than trying to hammer it into submission. The journey into understanding detachment and natural arrival is not a one-time insight, but an ongoing practice. Each day brings new opportunities to choose trust over control, surrender over grasping, patience over anxiety. Each moment offers you a chance to notice where you're trying to force something that wants to unfold naturally. Every challenge becomes a teacher showing you where you're still holding on too tightly, where you haven't yet learned to let the river flow. This is not about becoming perfect at detachment. This is about gradually, gently, with great compassion for yourself, learning to hold life more lightly while engaging with it more fully. In the monasteries of ancient Asia, monks would spend years studying texts, learning techniques, engaging in rigorous practices. But the true teaching, the one that actually transformed lives, was always simple. It was this: what is meant for you will not miss you. What misses you was not meant for you. This doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic. This means developing the wisdom to know the difference between aligned action and forced manipulation, between patient persistence and desperate grasping, between preparing yourself to receive and demanding that life deliver according to your timeline. The teaching of natural arrival challenges one of the deepest fears that most humans carry. The fear that if you don't push, control, and force outcomes, you'll end up with nothing. This fear is so deeply embedded in our consciousness that it operates like an invisible puppet master, pulling strings that make us dance in patterns of anxiety and striving. But what if this fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how life actually works? What if the universe is not a hostile force that must be battled and conquered, but a benevolent intelligence that is always working for your highest good, even when your limited perspective cannot see the bigger picture? There is a story from Zen Buddhism about a farmer and his son who lived in a small village. One day, the farmer's only horse ran away. The neighbors came to express their sympathy. "How terrible," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to celebrate. "How wonderful," they exclaimed. Again the farmer said only, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors returned with their condolences. "How awful," they lamented. The farmer's response remained unchanged. "Maybe." A week later, military officials came to the village to draft young men into the army. The farmer's son was passed over because of his broken leg. Once more, the neighbors appeared, congratulating the farmer on this fortunate turn of events. And once more the farmer simply said, "Maybe." This story is famous in Buddhist teaching because it illustrates something profound about the nature of judgment and attachment to outcomes. The farmer understood that he could not possibly know whether any single event was ultimately good or bad because he could not see the full tapestry of cause and effect. His wisdom lay not in predicting or controlling outcomes, but in remaining open and equanimous regardless of what appeared to be happening. He had learned the art of allowing life to unfold without the constant interference of his preferences and judgments. Most people live their entire lives in the opposite way. Something happens that matches their preferences and they grab onto it, trying to make it stay forever. Something happens that contradicts their desires and they fight against it, trying to push it away. This constant grasping and resisting creates enormous suffering. It's like trying to hold onto water. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you cup your hands gently and remain still, the water naturally gathers in your palms. The Buddhist understanding of detachment is rooted in the recognition that everything in the material world is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. This is not a depressing truth meant to make you cynical or nihilistic. This is a liberating truth meant to free you from the exhausting work of trying to freeze frame moments of pleasure and avoid moments of discomfort. When you truly understand impermanence, you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You learn to receive what comes with gratitude, experience it fully, and release it when it's time to go. In ancient India, there was a wealthy merchant who had accumulated great riches. He was obsessed with protecting his wealth, constantly worried about thieves, disasters, or bad investments. His anxiety about losing what he had prevented him from enjoying what he had. He couldn't sleep peacefully. He couldn't form genuine friendships because he suspected everyone of wanting his money. His wealth, which was supposed to bring him security and happiness, had actually become his prison. One day, a massive fire swept through the city, destroying his warehouses and taking everything he owned. Standing in the ashes of his former fortune, something unexpected happened. He felt relief. The burden of protecting what he had been carrying was suddenly lifted. In losing everything, he discovered a freedom he hadn't known since childhood. He realized that his attachment to his possessions had been far heavier than the possessions themselves. This story doesn't mean you should want to lose everything or that material comfort is wrong. It means that your peace cannot be dependent on external circumstances remaining stable because external circumstances never remain stable. Everything in the physical world is in constant flux, constant change, constant motion. When you base your sense of security on controlling these changing conditions, you guarantee your own anxiety. But when you find your security in something deeper, something that doesn't change regardless of external circumstances, you discover a peace that can't be shaken by gain or loss, success or failure, praise or blame. What is this unchanging foundation? The Buddhist masters point to your essential nature, your Buddha nature, the consciousness that is aware of all experiences but is not itself affected by those experiences. This consciousness is like the screen upon which movies are projected. Whether the movie is a comedy or a tragedy, an action film or a romance, the screen itself remains unchanged. It is not damaged by violent scenes or improved by beautiful scenes. It simply provides the space for all experiences to arise and pass away. When you identify with this unchanging awareness rather than with the changing contents of your experience, you find a stability that allows you to engage fully with life while remaining fundamentally at peace. But how does this relate to the principle that what's meant for you will arrive naturally? Everything is connected. When you stop identifying with the small self that wants, fears, grasps, and resists, you naturally align with a larger intelligence that can guide your life far more effectively than your anxious planning ever could. Think about it this way. Your conscious mind can hold and process a limited amount of information at any given time. Even the smartest person can only consider a handful of variables when making decisions. But the universe, the vast intelligence that orchestrates the movement of atoms and galaxies, can process infinite variables simultaneously. It sees connections you cannot see, timing you cannot calculate, possibilities you cannot imagine. When you try to force outcomes based on your limited understanding, you're essentially telling the universe, I know better than you. My tiny perspective is superior to your infinite wisdom. This is not confidence. This is the arrogance of ignorance. True confidence is trusting that while you cannot see the whole picture, something larger can and does. True wisdom is doing your part, taking aligned action, preparing yourself, and then releasing the results to forces far more intelligent than your individual mind. There was once a man who wanted to be a great musician. He practiced day and night, studied with the best teachers, performed whenever he could, but success eluded him. Despite his talent and dedication, he couldn't seem to break through into the recognition he sought. Years passed, and he grew bitter, wondering why the universe was denying him what he deserved. Finally, exhausted and discouraged, he gave up his dream of fame and took a simple job teaching music to children in a poor neighborhood. He thought this was failure, settling for less, the death of his dreams. But in teaching those children, he discovered a joy and sense of purpose he had never felt in his pursuit of personal glory. One of his students went on to become a famous composer who credited this teacher with changing his life. Another student grew up to start a music program that brought healing to thousands of people. The man's influence spread far beyond what any personal fame could have achieved. What he had thought was failure was actually his destiny arriving in different packaging than he had imagined. This is often how natural arrival works. What's meant for you doesn't always look the way you expect it to look. It doesn't always arrive when you think it should arrive. It doesn't always take the form you believe it should take. This is why attachment to specific outcomes creates so much suffering. You become so fixated on getting life to match your mental picture that you fail to recognize the actual gifts that are being offered to you. You spend so much energy trying to open a door that's locked that you don't notice the window that's wide open right next to you. The practice of detachment asks you to hold your intentions and desires with an open hand. Yes, know what you want. Yes, move toward it with purposeful action. Yes, develop your skills and prepare yourself. But no, don't strangle your dreams with desperate need. No, don't poison your present moment with anxiety about the future. No, don't close yourself off to alternative pathways by rigidly insisting that there's only one way things can work out. This open-handed approach creates space for synchronicity, for serendipity, for the mysterious ways that life conspires to bring you what you need exactly when you need it. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a concept called Wu Wei, which is often translated as effortless action or non-doing. This doesn't mean literally doing nothing. It means acting from a place of alignment with the natural flow, rather than from a place of forcing and contriving. Think about how you breathe. You don't have to consciously manage every inhale and exhale. You don't have to remember to breathe or force air into your lungs. Breathing happens naturally, effortlessly, because you're aligned with your body's wisdom. Wu Wei is like this. It's living in such harmony with the deeper intelligence of life that your actions flow naturally, effortlessly, effectively, without the strain and struggle that comes from trying to impose your will on reality. When you watch a master craftsman at work, you see Wu Wei in action. The wood carver doesn't force the wood into shapes it doesn't want to take. He works with the grain, with the natural character of the wood, allowing the sculpture to emerge rather than imposing a form upon it. The martial artist doesn't meet force with force. She uses the opponent's energy, redirecting it with minimal effort. The skilled sailor doesn't fight against the wind. He adjusts his sails to work with whatever wind is blowing. This is the wisdom of natural arrival applied to action. You work with what is rather than fighting against it. You find the path of least resistance. You trust that life is not your enemy but your partner in the dance of existence. But this kind of trust must be practiced. It must be developed like a muscle that grows stronger with use. In the beginning, every time you face uncertainty, your conditioned patterns will arise. Your mind will want to grasp, control, manipulate, force. Your fear will present compelling arguments for why you must take charge and make things happen. Your ego will resist the vulnerability of surrender. This is normal. This is part of the journey. The practice is not to banish these responses, but to notice them with compassion, and then gently choose a different way. Each time you choose trust over control, you strengthen your capacity for trust. Each time you choose surrender over force, you deepen your alignment with natural flow. There is a beautiful practice in Zen Buddhism where you simply sit and observe your breath. You don't try to control your breathing. You don't try to make it deeper or slower or more regular. You simply observe whatever breath is arising naturally. At first, your mind will want to interfere, to improve, to control, but gradually, as you practice just observing without interfering, you discover something profound. Your breath knows exactly what to do without your management. Your body's wisdom is far superior to your conscious control. This practice of observing without interfering trains you in the art of trust. It teaches you experientially that not everything needs your intervention, that some things work better when you get out of the way. This same principle applies to your life as a whole. Not everything needs your anxious management. Not every problem needs your immediate solution. Not every uncertainty needs to be resolved right now. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back, trust the process, and allow the natural intelligence of life to work things out in its own way and timing. This doesn't mean becoming passive or irresponsible. It means developing the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait, when to push and when to yield, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. As you deepen into this understanding of natural arrival, you begin to notice patterns in your life. You start to see how often you've been swimming against the current, exhausting yourself in resistance to what is. You recognize moments when you forced doors open that should have remained closed, or clung to situations long past their expiration date out of fear of the unknown. But you also begin to remember times when you did trust, when you did surrender, and how those moments led to outcomes more beautiful than anything you could have planned. These memories become touchstones, reminders that the path of allowing is not just theoretical wisdom, but lived experience. In a monastery in Japan, there lived an old tea master who was revered throughout the land for the perfection of his ceremonies. Students would come from distant provinces to study with him, hoping to learn the secret of his extraordinary skill. But the master rarely gave direct instruction. Instead, he would simply perform the tea ceremony with complete presence and attention, allowing his students to observe. One particularly eager student grew frustrated with this approach and demanded explicit teaching. The master smiled and said, "I am teaching you the most important lesson. The tea ceremony cannot be forced or hurried. The water must be heated to exactly the right temperature, not sooner, not later. The tea must steep for precisely the correct duration, not rushed, not prolonged. Every movement must arise from stillness, not from anxious striving." When you learn to work with the natural timing of things, when you learn to allow each step to complete itself fully before moving to the next, then you will understand not just tea ceremony, but life itself. This teaching points to something we've lost in modern culture, the wisdom of natural timing. We live in an age of instant gratification, of same-day delivery, of impatient demand for immediate results. We've forgotten that there is a season for planting and a season for harvest, and no amount of anxiety or force can eliminate the necessary time between them. A farmer who plants seeds and then digs them up the next day to see if they're growing would be considered foolish, yet this is exactly how most people approach their lives. They set an intention, take some action, and then immediately begin anxiously checking to see if it's working, digging up their metaphorical seeds before they've had time to take root and grow. The principle of natural arrival includes within it the principle of natural timing. What's meant for you will arrive not just naturally, but at the natural time, which is often different from your preferred time. This can be one of the most challenging aspects of trust because waiting feels so passive, so vulnerable, so uncertain. Your mind wants to know when, how, through whom, in what form. Your fear wants guarantees, timelines, clear markers of progress. But life doesn't work according to your schedule. Life works according to its own deep rhythms, its own mysterious timing that somehow orchestrates billions of individual lives into a coherent whole. Think about conception and birth. Once conception occurs, there is a natural gestation period that cannot be rushed. A human baby requires approximately 9 months to develop. No amount of wishing, worrying, or willing can speed up this process. Trying to birth the baby at 6 months would result in serious complications. The timing is not arbitrary, it's necessary for proper development. The same principle applies to everything in life. Ideas need time to mature, skills need time to develop, relationships need time to deepen, careers need time to build, character needs time to strengthen. When you try to force premature manifestation, you often create problems rather than solutions. There was once a woman who desperately wanted to start her own business. She had a vision, a passion, a clear sense of purpose, but every time she tried to launch, obstacles appeared. Funding fell through, partners backed out, timing felt off. She grew increasingly frustrated, interpreting these obstacles as signs of failure or the universe working against her. But a wise mentor suggested a different interpretation. Perhaps, the mentor said, these delays are not obstacles, but preparation. Perhaps you're being given time to develop skills you'll need, to meet people who will be crucial later, to mature in ways necessary for the success of your vision. The woman reluctantly accepted this perspective and used the waiting time to deepen her expertise, to study successful businesses in her field, to build relationships and learn from failures. When her business finally did launch, 3 years later than she had originally planned, it succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. She later realized that if it had launched when she first wanted it to, she wouldn't have been ready. The timing that had frustrated her had actually been perfect. This is the wisdom of trust in natural timing. Delays are not always denials. Waiting is not always wasting. Sometimes what feels like life saying no is actually life saying not yet. The practice is learning to use waiting time wisely, to trust that if something hasn't arrived yet, you're not yet fully ready to receive it, or it's not yet fully ready to be received. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you focus on what you can do now, on who you can become now, on how you can serve now, while remaining open to opportunities and insights that emerge in their own timing. In Buddhist psychology, there is a concept called the middle way. This is the path between extremes, between the extreme of desperate grasping and the extreme of passive giving up. The middle way is engaged presence. It's showing up fully for your life, taking meaningful action, investing yourself in what matters, while simultaneously holding all outcomes lightly. It's caring deeply while not attaching your worth or peace to results. This middle way is often misunderstood because it looks paradoxical to the either-or thinking of the conditioned mind. How can you care deeply and not be attached? How can you work hard toward goals while being okay if they don't manifest as planned? The answer lies in understanding the difference between preference and requirement. You can prefer certain outcomes while not requiring them for your fundamental okayness. You can work toward goals while finding meaning and fulfillment in the process itself rather than only in the destination. You can desire things without making your happiness dependent on obtaining them. This middle way creates a kind of inner freedom that actually makes you more effective in the world, not less. When you're not paralyzed by fear of failure, not desperate with need, not contracted with anxiety, you have access to far more creativity, intuition, and natural intelligence. You make better decisions because you're not deciding from fear. You take wiser risks because your sense of security doesn't depend on outcomes. You connect more authentically with others because you're not manipulating them to meet your needs. There is a story about a Zen archer who became famous throughout Japan for his incredible skill. He could split arrows in flight, hit targets blindfolded, perform feats that seemed impossible. When asked the secret of his mastery, he said something unexpected. "I do not aim at the target. I become one with the bow, the arrow, the target, the space between. In that unified state, hitting the target is as natural as breathing. The moment I grasp at hitting the target, the moment I fear missing, the moment I think about my reputation or what others will think, I separate myself from the unified state, and my aim becomes false." This archer understood that the highest skill comes not from trying harder, but from entering a state of such complete presence and unity with what you're doing that the outcome takes care of itself. This is the state that becomes possible through detachment. When you're not grasping at outcomes, when you're not identified with results, when you're simply fully present with the action itself, you enter a flow state where your natural intelligence can operate without interference from anxiety or self-consciousness. Athletes call this being in the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Spiritual teachers call it alignment or grace. Whatever name you use, it's a state where effort becomes effortless, where you're simultaneously doing and not doing, where what's meant to happen happens through you rather than by you. But accessing this state requires trust, and building trust requires practice. Every day presents opportunities to practice letting go of control, to practice trusting natural timing, to practice holding your preferences lightly. Maybe you're stuck in traffic. Instead of raging against something you cannot change, you practice acceptance. You trust that you'll arrive exactly when you're meant to arrive. Maybe you're waiting to hear back about a job application. Instead of obsessively checking your email and spinning stories about what the delay means, you practice patience. You trust that you'll hear when the time is right, and either way, you'll be okay. Maybe someone you care about is pulling away. Instead of desperately trying to hold on to them, you practice releasing. You trust that relationships which are meant to last will last, and those that need to end will end, and your heart will survive either outcome. These small daily practices of trust accumulate over time into a fundamental reorientation of your relationship with life. You begin to live from a place of essential security rather than chronic anxiety. This doesn't mean you never feel fear or uncertainty. It means these feelings no longer drive your decisions. You can feel afraid and still trust. You can feel uncertain and still take aligned action. You can acknowledge difficulty while maintaining faith in the larger intelligence that's orchestrating your life. In ancient Buddhist texts, there are teachings about what they call the thinker and the prover. Your mind is divided into these two functions. The thinker can think anything. It can generate an infinite variety of thoughts, beliefs, interpretations, and stories. The prover then goes out into the world and finds evidence to prove whatever the thinker has thought. If your thinker generates the thought, "Life is against me, nothing ever works out," your prover will find countless examples to support this belief. But if your thinker generates the thought, "Life is working for me, even when I can't see how," your prover will find evidence for this belief instead. The raw material of life is neutral. It's your interpretation that colors it with meaning. This teaching is crucial for understanding natural arrival. If you believe that you must force and control everything or it will all fall apart, you'll find plenty of evidence to support that belief. Your life will become an exhausting battle to manage every detail. But if you believe that there's a deeper intelligence at work, that what's meant for you will find you, that you're being guided even when you can't see the path, you'll find evidence for this belief instead. Your life will unfold with a quality of grace and ease that looks almost magical to those still operating from the paradigm of control. The shift from one belief system to the other doesn't usually happen all at once. It happens gradually through the accumulation of experiences where you trusted and things worked out, where you surrendered control and discovered you were held, where you let go of forcing and found that what you needed arrived anyway. Each of these experiences becomes evidence that rewires your belief system at deeper and deeper levels. Over time, trust stops being something you have to remind yourself to do and becomes your natural way of being. One of the most profound aspects of the teaching about natural arrival is how it transforms your relationship with failure and disappointment. When you're operating from the old paradigm of control, anything that doesn't match your preferences feels like failure. You interpret obstacles as evidence that you're doing something wrong or that life is working against you. You take delays personally, as though the universe is deliberately withholding what you deserve. This interpretation creates enormous suffering because life inevitably includes circumstances that don't match your preferences. No one gets everything they want exactly when and how they want it. From the perspective of the control paradigm, this makes life a constant source of frustration. But from the perspective of natural arrival, everything that happens is information, guidance, course correction. What you call failure might actually be protection from a path that would have led to greater difficulty. What you call disappointment might actually be redirection towards something more aligned with your highest good. What you call obstacles might actually be opportunities in disguise. This shift in interpretation doesn't mean you pretend everything is wonderful when it's not. It means you remain open to the possibility that you cannot judge any event in isolation, that you cannot know from your limited perspective whether something is ultimately fortunate or unfortunate. There is a famous story from Taoist tradition that illustrates this beautifully. A man was travelling through the countryside when he came upon another man standing in a rice paddy pulling up weeds. The traveller watched in amazement as the farmer carefully examined each weed before deciding whether to remove it or leave it. "Why do you take so much care with weeds?" the traveller asked. The farmer looked up with a smile. "Some of what appears to be weeds are actually useful plants that will benefit the rice. Some of what appears to be rice is actually a harmful plant that will damage the crop. I must look carefully at each one, not assume I know which is which based on first appearance." This farmer understood that initial appearances can be deceiving, that what seems bad might be good and what seems good might be bad, and that careful discernment is more useful than quick judgment. Most people do not bring this kind of careful discernment to their lives. They label experiences as good or bad, wanted or unwanted, success or failure, based on immediate feeling or surface appearance. Then they spend enormous energy trying to increase the things they've labeled good and eliminate the things they've labeled bad. But this approach creates a life of constant struggle because you're fighting reality. You're trying to have an experience that includes only what you've judged as positive, which is impossible. Life is a package deal. It includes birth and death, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, connection and separation. Trying to have only one side of any polarity is like trying to have a coin with only heads, a battery with only a positive pole, a magnet with only one end. It cannot be done. The wisdom of detachment is accepting the full spectrum of human experience while not being destroyed by the parts you find difficult. It's holding your heart open to joy while knowing that sorrow will also come. It's pursuing your dreams while knowing that some will manifest and others won't. It's loving people while knowing that all relationships eventually end, either through growing apart or through death. This acceptance doesn't make you cynical or depressed. It makes you realistic, grounded, and paradoxically more capable of deep happiness, because your happiness isn't dependent on denying half of reality. When something you wanted doesn't manifest, the practice is to ask, what is this teaching me? Where is this guiding me? What am I being invited to see, learn, or become? These questions keep you in a learning stance rather than a victim stance. They help you extract wisdom and growth from every experience rather than just suffering. This doesn't mean you override genuine grief or disappointment with spiritual bypassing. If something painful happens, you feel the pain, you honor your human emotions, but you don't add unnecessary suffering by telling yourself stories about what it means about your worth, your future, or life's fundamental nature. There was once a potter who created beautiful ceramic pieces. One day, after weeks of work on an elaborate vase, it cracked in the kiln. The potter was devastated. All that time, effort, and vision seemed wasted, but as he was about to throw away the broken pieces, he noticed something interesting about the crack pattern. It gave him an idea for a new technique, a way of deliberately creating cracks and filling them with gold to create a kind of art that highlighted the breaks rather than hiding them. This technique, which came to be called kintsugi, became more valuable and sought after than his original perfect pieces. The failure had led to innovation that only became possible because he remained open to seeing opportunity within disappointment. This is often how natural arrival works. What appears to be a setback opens a door to something you never would have discovered otherwise. The job you didn't get leads you to a different field where you find your true calling. The relationship that ended clears space for a healthier partnership. The health crisis forces lifestyle changes that actually improve your quality of life. The financial loss teaches you skills and resilience that serve you for decades. You cannot see these silver linings in the moment of disappointment. That's why trust is so crucial. You must hold space for the possibility that this too is part of a larger pattern that's working for your benefit, even when you can't see how. In Buddhist teaching, there is a concept called dependent origination, which recognizes that everything arises from multiple causes and conditions. Nothing happens in isolation. Every event is connected to countless other events in an intricate web of causality that extends backwards and forwards in time. You cannot see this full web. You can only see a tiny fragment of it from your limited perspective. This means you cannot accurately judge any single event because you cannot see all the causes that led to it or all the effects that will flow from it. The wise response is humility, openness, trust that there's a larger intelligence at work that can see the full pattern even when you cannot. This is not blind faith. This is trust earned through experience. As you live with more openness, more willingness to see setbacks as potential setups, more capacity to remain curious rather than immediately judgmental, you begin to accumulate experiences where things that seemed terrible turned out to contain hidden gifts. These experiences gradually build a foundation of trust that allows you to face new difficulties with more equanimity. You think, I don't know what this is yet. It looks bad right now, but I've learned that I cannot judge things by their immediate appearance. I'll remain open and see what emerges. There is tremendous power in this stance of open curiosity. When you're not contracted in resistance, not closed down in defense, not spinning anxious stories about worst-case scenarios, you remain available to see solutions, opportunities, and possibilities that you would miss if you were in a state of fear. It's like the difference between a clenched fist and an open hand. The clenched fist cannot receive anything. The open hand can receive whatever is being offered. Life is always offering you something, but you can only receive it if your hands and heart are open. The practice of opening requires courage because it makes you vulnerable. When you release control, you admit that you're not in charge. When you trust in natural arrival, you acknowledge that you don't know best. When you accept what is rather than demanding what you prefer, you give up the illusion of power that the ego so desperately wants to maintain. This can feel frightening because the ego interprets letting go as death. And in a sense, it is death, the death of the false self that thinks it's separate, autonomous, in control. But this death is not the end. It's the beginning of a more authentic way of being where you're aligned with reality rather than fighting against it. In Zen monasteries, there is a practice called the Great Death, and practitioners are guided to completely let go of all attachments, all identifications, all sense of separate self. They describe it as dying while still alive. What they discover on the other side of this death is not extinction, but liberation. When the false self dies, the true self is revealed. When the illusion of control is surrendered, real power emerges. When grasping stops, abundance flows. This is the paradox at the heart of spiritual teaching. You must lose your life to find it. You must give up control to gain true influence. You must stop chasing what you want to receive what you need. But this doesn't happen through intellectual understanding alone. You cannot think your way into trust. You must practice your way into it through repeated experiences of letting go and discovering that you're held. Start small. Practice with low-stakes situations. When you're running late, practice accepting that you'll arrive when you arrive and trusting that the timing is somehow perfect. When you're waiting in line, practice being fully present instead of resisting the wait. When someone disappoints you, practice remaining open to them rather than closing your heart. These small practices build the muscle of trust that will serve you when facing bigger challenges. Over time, you'll notice that life begins to feel different. There's more ease, more flow, more synchronicity. Things fall into place with less effort. Opportunities appear at just the right moment. People enter your life exactly when you need them. This isn't magic, though it can feel magical. This is what happens when you align with natural intelligence rather than fighting against it. You're like a sailboat that has finally adjusted its sails to work with the wind rather than against it. The wind was always there, ready to carry you. You just had to stop fighting it and learn to work with it. As your understanding of natural arrival deepens, you begin to see that this principle applies not just to external circumstances, but to your internal landscape as well. Emotions, thoughts, insights, and states of consciousness also arrive naturally when the conditions are right. You cannot force yourself to feel happy, to think positively, to have profound insights, or to experience spiritual awakening. These arise according to their own laws, their own timing, their own mysterious intelligence. And just as with external circumstances, your attempts to force internal states usually create the opposite of what you're seeking. Think about trying to fall asleep. When you desperately want to sleep, when you try hard to make sleep happen, when you worry about not sleeping, what happens? You stay awake. Sleep only comes when you stop trying, when you relax into allowing rather than forcing. The same principle applies to healing from emotional pain. When you try to rush through grief, when you demand that you should be over something by now, when you resist the natural process of healing, you actually slow down that process. But when you allow feelings to arise and move through you in their own timing, when you trust that your psyche knows how to heal itself if you don't interfere, recovery happens more completely and authentically. There was once a man who went to a therapist seeking help with depression. He had been depressed for years and had tried everything to fix it. Positive thinking, medication, lifestyle changes, spiritual practices. Nothing seemed to work, and he was growing desperate. The therapist listened carefully and then said something unexpected. What if you stopped trying to get rid of your depression and instead got curious about it? What if you stopped treating it as an enemy to be defeated and instead asked it what it's trying to tell you? The man was skeptical but agreed to try. Over the following months, as he developed a different relationship with his depression, as he stopped fighting it and started listening to it, something shifted. The depression began to reveal its roots in unexpressed grief, unmet needs, and a life path that wasn't aligned with his authentic values. As he addressed these underlying issues, the depression gradually lifted, not because he forced it away, but because he removed the conditions that were maintaining it. This story illustrates something crucial about natural arrival as it applies to inner experience. Your symptoms, your difficult emotions, your struggles are not usually random problems to be eliminated. They are often intelligent responses to conditions that need to change. When you fight against them, you're fighting against your own inner wisdom. But when you become curious about them, when you ask what they're trying to tell you, when you trust that they're arising for a reason, you open the possibility of understanding and resolving the actual issue rather than just suppressing the symptom. In Buddhist psychology, there is a beautiful teaching about working with difficult emotions. Instead of trying to get rid of anger, fear, sadness, or shame, the practice is to welcome them as guests. You invite them in, offer them tea, get to know them. You ask, "What have you come to teach me? What do you need me to understand? What are you protecting me from?" This approach transforms your relationship with your inner experience. Instead of being at war with parts of yourself, instead of dividing your experience into acceptable and unacceptable, instead of trying to cultivate only pleasant states, you develop a spacious acceptance that can hold all of it. This internal detachment is just as important as detachment from external outcomes. You learn to have preferences about your inner experience without demanding that you always feel a certain way. You can prefer peace while accepting that anxiety sometimes arises. You can prefer confidence while accepting that insecurity is part of the human experience. You can prefer clarity while accepting that confusion is sometimes necessary for the process of figuring things out. This acceptance doesn't make you passive about your inner life. It makes you wise about it. You learn the difference between skillful action that actually promotes well-being and counterproductive fighting that just creates more tension. There is a meditation practice in Buddhism called just sitting, where you simply observe whatever arises in consciousness without trying to change it, improve it, or get rid of it. Thoughts come and go, feelings arise and pass, sensations appear and disappear. You just watch it all with interested curiosity, like watching weather patterns move across the sky. What practitioners discover through this practice is profound. When you stop interfering with your inner experience, when you stop trying to control your thoughts and feelings, they naturally settle. The mind naturally becomes quieter. Emotions naturally process and release. Peace naturally emerges, not because you forced it, but because you stopped preventing it. This is the principle of natural arrival applied to inner states. The peace you seek is already present beneath the turbulence. The wisdom you long for is already available beneath the confusion. The love you crave is already flowing beneath the fear. You You don't have to create these qualities. You have to stop obscuring them with your resistance and grasping. It's like a jar of muddy water. If you keep shaking the jar, trying to make the water clear, it stays muddy. But if you simply set the jar down and leave it alone, the mud naturally settles to the bottom and the water becomes clear. Your mind works the same way. When you stop stirring it up with constant interference, it naturally clarifies. But this takes trust. You must trust that your natural state is actually wholesome, that you don't need constant management and control to be okay. Most people carry a deep fear that if they stop trying to improve themselves, if they stop fighting against their shadow side, if they stop forcing themselves to be positive and productive, they'll fall apart or become lazy or morph into someone terrible. This fear keeps them in a constant state of self-improvement that paradoxically prevents actual growth. Real growth, lasting transformation, happens not through force but through understanding, acceptance, and allowing natural wisdom to emerge. Think about how a child learns to walk. The child doesn't study biomechanics or force muscles to operate correctly. The child simply has an impulse to walk and starts trying. They fall down repeatedly, but they don't interpret falling as failure or evidence that they're not meant to walk. They simply get up and try again. There's no self-judgment, no shame, no story about what falling means. They trust the natural learning process, and within a remarkably short time, through this process of allowing, adjusting, and trying again, they master the incredibly complex skill of walking. This natural learning process is still available to you as an adult, but most people have layered so much judgment and control on top of it that they can't access it anymore. The practice is learning to get out of your own way. Learning to trust that if you create the right conditions and then step back, natural intelligence will do what needs to be done. A gardener creates conditions for growth by preparing soil, providing water and sunlight, removing weeds, but the gardener doesn't make the plant grow. Growth happens naturally when conditions are right. You can approach your life the same way. Create conditions for well-being by taking care of your body, surrounding yourself with supportive people, engaging in meaningful work, spending time in nature. But don't try to force specific outcomes. Trust that when conditions are right, what's meant to unfold will unfold naturally. In ancient times, there was a king who was troubled by anxiety despite having everything he could want. He consulted with the wisest sage in his kingdom. The sage gave him a ring engraved with words and told him to look at the ring whenever he felt overwhelmed. The king looked at the inscription, "This too shall pass." The sage explained, "When you're suffering, remember that this will pass. When you're happy, remember that this will also pass. Nothing is permanent." This understanding brings equanimity. The king wore the ring for the rest of his life, and it helped him navigate both difficulties and triumphs with greater balance. This teaching points to the impermanence that is at the heart of natural arrival. Everything that arrives naturally will also leave naturally. Trying to hold on to pleasant experiences, trying to prevent change, trying to make any state permanent is fighting against the fundamental nature of reality. Everything is in motion. Everything is transitional. You are not a fixed self, but a process. A flowing river, a constantly changing pattern. When you align with this reality rather than resisting it, life becomes far less stressful. You can enjoy what's here without desperately clinging to it. You can endure what's difficult without feeling it will last forever. You ride the waves of experience rather than being tossed about by them. This doesn't mean you become detached in the sense of not caring. You care deeply, you love fully, you engage completely, but you hold everything with an open hand, knowing that all of it is temporary, all of it is on loan, all of it will eventually change form. This attitude actually allows you to be more present, more appreciative, more fully alive. When you know that this moment is unique and will never come again, you pay attention to it. When you know that this person won't be in your life forever, you treasure the time you have together. When you know that your health, your youth, your current circumstances are temporary, you don't take them for granted. The teaching of natural arrival includes a profound reframe of what responsibility actually means. Many people equate being responsible with trying to control everything, with believing that outcomes are entirely dependent on their personal efforts. This creates an enormous burden. You feel like you have to manage every detail, anticipate every problem, force every good thing to happen through sheer will. This is exhausting and ultimately ineffective because you simply don't have that much control. Reality is far too complex, far too interconnected, far too mysterious to be managed by your individual will. True responsibility is doing your part and then trusting that the rest will take care of itself. It's understanding what is actually within your sphere of influence and releasing what isn't. You are responsible for your choices, your actions, your attitudes, your responses. You are not responsible for outcomes, other people's choices, the past, or the fundamental nature of reality. Making this distinction clear frees enormous energy that was being wasted on trying to control the uncontrollable. You can focus your efforts where they actually matter, where you can make a difference, and release the burden of trying to run the universe. There is a story about a monk who was walking through a forest when he encountered a man frantically trying to push a large boulder up a hill. The man was exhausted, covered in sweat, on the verge of collapse. The monk asked, "Why are you doing this?" The man replied, "My teacher told me to move this boulder." The monk looked puzzled. "Did your teacher tell you to push it up the hill?" The man paused. "No, he just said to move it." The monk smiled. "Perhaps you could roll it down the hill instead. That would be moving it, wouldn't it? And it would work with gravity rather than against it." The man suddenly realized he had assumed that moving the boulder meant doing it the hardest way possible. He had created his own suffering by not looking for the path of least resistance. This story captures how many people approach life. They assume that if something is important, it must be difficult. They believe that achievement requires struggle. They think that ease means they're not trying hard enough. But what if the opposite is true? What if ease is actually a sign that you're aligned with natural flow? What if things coming together effortlessly means you're on the right path? What if struggle is often a sign that you're fighting against reality rather than working with it? This doesn't mean that meaningful things never require effort. It means that there's a difference between aligned effort and struggling against reality. Aligned effort feels challenging but energizing. You're stretched but not stressed. You're working hard, but there's a quality of flow, of rightness, of being carried by something larger than yourself. Struggling against reality feels grinding, depleting, like pushing a boulder uphill. You're exhausted, but making little progress. Everything feels like a battle. This quality of struggle is often a signal that you're not aligned, that you're trying to force something that isn't meant to be forced, or that your timing is off. Learning to distinguish between these two types of effort is crucial for living according to natural arrival. You don't want to give up at the first sign of difficulty, confusing laziness with trust, but you also don't want to keep pushing against closed doors, confusing stubbornness with perseverance. The way to tell the difference is to check in with your body and your deeper knowing. Aligned effort, even when challenging, tends to feel expansive in your body. There's a sense of yes underneath the difficulty. Misaligned effort tends to feel contracting. There's a sense of resistance, of something being off, even when you can't articulate what it is. In a village in ancient India, there was a young man who wanted to study with a particular spiritual teacher. He travelled to the teacher's ashram and asked to become a student. The teacher said no. The young man was disappointed but didn't give up. He returned the next month and asked again. Again, the teacher said no. This continued for a year. Every month the young man would ask, and every month the teacher would refuse. Finally, after 12 rejections, the teacher accepted him as a student. The young man asked, "Why did you refuse me so many times?" The teacher replied, "I needed to see if your desire to learn was genuine and lasting, or just a temporary enthusiasm. Many people come seeking teaching, but few have the patience and persistence to actually walk the path. Your returning month after month showed me you were serious." This story illustrates an important distinction. The young man was persistent, but he wasn't forcing. He kept showing up, kept asking, but he also kept accepting each no with grace. He didn't try to manipulate the teacher or force his way in. He trusted that if this teaching was meant for him, the door would eventually open, and it did. His persistence was aligned, not desperate. He was willing to wait, willing to be patient, willing to respect the teacher's timing. This is very different from the energy of someone who refuses to take no for answer, who pushes and manipulates and forces their way in. One is trust expressing itself as patient persistence. The other is fear expressing itself as desperate grasping. As you develop sensitivity to these distinctions, you become much more skilled at navigating your life. You learn when to push and when to pause, when to persist and when to pivot, when to hold on and when to let go. This is not a formula you can apply mechanically. It's a wisdom that develops through practice, through paying attention to results, through learning from both successes and failures. Over time, you develop a felt sense of alignment. You can feel when you're in flow and when you're fighting upstream. You learn to trust this feeling as guidance. In Buddhist teachings, there is a concept called right effort. This is effort that is appropriate to the situation, neither too much nor too little. It's like tuning a guitar string. Too loose and it doesn't make proper sound. Too tight and it breaks. Right effort finds the balance point where the string produces beautiful music. Most people err on the side of too much effort. They believe that more is always better, that if something is worth doing, it's worth overdoing. But this approach leads to burnout, to forcing, to outcomes that are technically achieved but hollow because they were attained through struggle rather than flow. Right effort means showing up fully without tipping into striving. It means caring deeply without attachment to outcomes. It means working steadily without anxiety about results. This balanced approach is actually more effective than either extreme. When you're not depleted by overexertion or paralyzed by passivity, you have sustained energy for the long journey. When you're not attached to specific outcomes, you remain flexible enough to adapt as circumstances change. When you're not driven by fear, you make clearer decisions and take wiser action. There was once a master calligrapher in Japan whose work was revered throughout the country. Students would study for years trying to replicate the beauty and power of his brushstrokes. One day, a student asked the master for the secret of his technique. The master picked up his brush, dipped it in ink, and in one fluid motion created a perfect character. "That is the secret," he said. "Complete presence, no hesitation, no second guessing. When the conditions are right, when preparation meets opportunity, action flows naturally like water flowing downhill. You don't make it happen, you allow it to happen through you." This teaching points to perhaps the deepest aspect of natural arrival. You are not separate from the universe. You are not an isolated individual trying to bend a hostile world to your will. You are an expression of the universe itself, the same intelligence that moves the planets, that orchestrates ecosystems, that guides the development of embryos into beings, is the intelligence that moves through you. When you align with this intelligence rather than fighting against it, when you become a clear channel rather than an obstructed one, life flows through you with grace and power. This doesn't happen through more effort, more control, more forcing. It happens through surrender, through letting go, through trust. It happens when you stop trying to be the puppet master and allow yourself to be danced by the larger intelligence that knows far more than you do. This requires a fundamental shift in identity. You must stop seeing yourself as separate, autonomous, solely responsible for making your life work. You must recognize yourself as part of a vast interconnected web where everything affects everything else, where you have influence but not control, where your part is important but is still just one part among billions. Making this shift can feel frightening because it means admitting you're not in charge. The ego doesn't like this. The ego wants to feel powerful, in control, autonomous. But the separate ego is actually quite weak. It's constantly threatened, constantly defending, constantly anxious about maintaining its illusory independence. The self that knows itself as part of the whole, that trusts in the larger intelligence, that allows life to move through it rather than trying to control life. This self is actually much more powerful. Not powerful in the sense of dominating, but powerful in the sense of being aligned with reality rather than fighting against it. One of the most challenging aspects of embracing natural arrival is dealing with the opinions and expectations of others. We live in a culture that often judges your worth by your achievements, your possessions, your status. When you step off the treadmill of constant striving, when you trust in natural unfolding rather than forcing outcomes, people might not understand. They might judge you as lazy, unmotivated, or not living up to your potential. They might pressure you to do more, be more, achieve more. Learning to stay centered in your own knowing while surrounded by others' projections and expectations requires great inner strength. There is a teaching story about a farmer whose son found a beautiful wild horse. The neighbors congratulated him on his good fortune, but the farmer simply said, "Maybe." The next day, the son was thrown from the horse and broke his leg. The neighbors expressed sympathy for this misfortune, but again the farmer said only, "Maybe." Soon after, military conscription came to the village, but the son was passed over because of his injury. Once more, neighbors commented on the farmer's good luck, and once more he responded, "Maybe." This pattern continued through many reversals of fortune. The farmer's wisdom lay not in predicting outcomes, but in not being swayed by others' judgments. He knew that external opinions about what was good or bad were just that, opinions, and that reality was far too complex to be captured by simple judgments. When you begin living according to the principle of natural arrival, you must develop a similar independence from others' opinions. This doesn't mean arrogance or dismissing all feedback. It means developing a strong enough center that you can hear others' perspectives without being knocked off balance by them. You can consider whether their input offers useful information while not automatically accepting their judgments or prescriptions. You become like a tree with deep roots that can bend in the wind without being uprooted. This inner stability comes from knowing your own values, your own truth, your own sense of what's right for you. When you're clear about these things, others' opinions become interesting information rather than threats to your sense of self. You can hear someone say, "You're not ambitious enough," without taking it as truth about your worth. You can hear someone say, "You should want more," without feeling obligated to adopt their desires. You can hear someone say, "You're wasting your potential," without believing their assessment of what your potential should look like. You remain sovereign in your own life, listening to the wisdom of your own heart rather than the prescriptions of others. But this doesn't happen overnight. Most people have been conditioned from childhood to look outside themselves for validation, for direction, for permission to be who they are. Parents, teachers, peers, media, culture, all have been telling you who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. Unlearning this conditioning and finding your own center is a journey that unfolds over time. It requires patience with yourself as you notice how often you automatically defer to others' judgments. It requires compassion as you discover how deeply the need for approval is embedded in your psyche. It requires courage to begin honoring your own knowing even when it contradicts others' expectations. There was once a young woman who wanted to be an artist. Everyone in her family pressured her to pursue a practical career that would provide financial security. They meant well, they cared about her welfare, but they couldn't understand her deep need to create, her sense that her life's purpose was to express beauty through art. For years, she tried to satisfy both her own calling and her family's expectations, attempting to do art on the side while maintaining a career she didn't care about. But this divided life left her depleted and unhappy. Finally, she made a difficult decision. She would honor her calling fully, even if it meant disappointing her family, even if it meant financial uncertainty. Within 2 years of committing fully to her art, she was supporting herself through her work. More importantly, she was alive in a way she had never been before. Her family gradually came to accept her choice when they saw how much it meant to her. This story illustrates something important about natural arrival and authentic living. When you honor your true path, even when others don't understand, life tends to support you. Not always in the ways you expect, not always on your preferred timeline, but somehow things work out. It's as though the universe rewards authenticity. When you're being genuinely yourself, when you're following your actual calling rather than someone else's idea of what you should do, you tap into a current of energy and support that isn't available when you're living inauthentically. This doesn't mean your path will be easy or that you won't face challenges. It means the challenges will be meaningful and you'll have the energy to meet them because you're not wasting energy pretending to be something you're not. The principle of natural arrival asks you to trust your own unfolding, your own timing, your own path, even when it doesn't look like anyone else's path. Comparison is one of the greatest obstacles to this trust. When you're constantly measuring your journey against others' journeys, you lose touch with your own rhythm. You start thinking you should be further along, should have achieved more, should want what others want. But everyone's path is unique. Everyone's timing is different. What's meant for you is specific to your particular combination of gifts, challenges, lessons, and destiny. Trying to live someone else's life, even someone you admire, is like trying to wear shoes that don't fit. They might look nice, but they'll never be comfortable. In Buddhist teaching, there is a concept called beginner's mind. This is approaching each moment with fresh eyes, without preconceptions, without comparing it to past experiences or others' experiences. When you bring beginner's mind to your own life, you stop judging your journey by external standards. You become curious about your unique unfolding. You ask, what is my life trying to become? What wants to emerge through me? What is my particular medicine to offer the world? These questions orient you toward your authentic path rather than some generic idea of success. As you live more authentically, more aligned with your true nature, you'll probably notice that some relationships change. People who were drawn to the false self you were presenting might lose interest. People who need you to stay small might feel threatened by your growth. This can be painful, but it's also natural and necessary. You're not betraying anyone by becoming yourself. You're actually offering everyone around you the gift of your authentic presence, and you're modeling for them that it's possible to live truthfully, which gives them permission to do the same if they choose. At the same time, you'll likely attract new connections with people who resonate with who you're actually becoming. Authentic people tend to find each other. When you stop wearing masks, you meet others who have also removed their masks. These connections tend to be deeper, more nourishing, more real than relationships based on false presentations. This is another aspect of natural arrival. The right people for your journey find you when you're being genuinely yourself. The right opportunities emerge when you're on your authentic path. You don't have to manipulate or manufacture these connections. They arise naturally from alignment. There is a beautiful practice in some spiritual traditions of regularly checking in with yourself to assess whether you're living in integrity. You ask yourself questions like, am I being honest about who I am and what I need? Am I following my own values or trying to meet others' expectations? Am I making choices that honor my authentic self, or choices designed to please, impress, or avoid disappointing others? This kind of honest self-inquiry helps you notice when you've drifted away from your center and gives you the opportunity to course correct before you get too far off track. Natural arrival in relationships means not forcing connections, not trying to make people love you, not performing to be chosen. It means showing up as you actually are and trusting that those who are meant to appreciate you will appreciate you, and those who aren't won't. This can feel vulnerable because you're no longer hiding behind a carefully constructed persona. You're exposing your actual self with all its imperfections and quirks. But this vulnerability is also tremendously liberating. When you're accepted for who you actually are, that acceptance actually means something. When you're loved for your true self, rather than for the image you project, that love can actually nourish you. Think about how exhausting it is to maintain a false front, to constantly monitor how you're being perceived, to edit your words and actions to fit some idea of how you should be. All that energy that goes into impression management could be used for living, creating, connecting, growing. When you release the need to be anything other than what you are, you free this energy for authentic engagement with life. This doesn't mean you have no boundaries or that you share everything with everyone. It means you stop performing, stop pretending, stop hiding your essential nature. As your understanding of natural arrival deepens through lived experience, you begin to notice subtle signs of alignment and misalignment. Your body becomes a sensitive instrument that gives you feedback about whether you're in flow or forcing. You start to recognize the quality of energy that accompanies aligned action versus the quality that accompanies struggling against reality. You develop what might be called spiritual discernment, the ability to sense what is yours to do and what isn't, what is ready to unfold and what needs more time, what is being offered by life and what you're trying to manufacture through control. Aligned action tends to feel energizing even when it's challenging. There's a sense of being carried, of doors opening, of synchronicities appearing, of things falling into place in ways you couldn't have orchestrated. Opportunities emerge from unexpected sources. The right people show up at the right time. Solutions present themselves that you weren't actively seeking. Resources become available just when you need them. This doesn't mean everything is easy. It means even the difficulties feel meaningful and manageable. There's a sense of rightness, of being in the right place, doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Misaligned action, in contrast, tends to feel depleting. Everything is a struggle. Obstacles appear constantly. Nothing flows smoothly. You feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. Resources are scarce. Support is hard to find. You're constantly stressed and exhausted. And underneath it all, there's often a quiet sense that something is off, that you're forcing something that doesn't want to be forced, that you're on a path that isn't actually yours. Learning to recognize and honor these signals is crucial for living according to natural arrival. There was once a businesswoman who had a clear vision for a company she wanted to create. She threw herself into the work, invested significant resources, dedicated years of effort. But despite her intelligence and hard work, the business struggled. Problems appeared constantly. Partners betrayed her. Funding dried up. Nothing seemed to flow. She interpreted this as a test of her commitment and pushed harder, unwilling to see the struggle as a message. Finally, after years of exhausting effort, the business failed completely. She was devastated, feeling that she had wasted years of her life. But in the empty space that followed this failure, something unexpected emerged. A completely different opportunity presented itself, something she hadn't previously considered. She pursued it almost casually, without the desperate attachment she had brought to the previous venture. This new path unfolded with remarkable ease. Opportunities appeared. The right people were attracted. Funding materialized. Within 2 years, she had created something far more successful than the original business would have been. Looking back, she realized that all the struggle with the first business had been life trying to redirect her toward her actual path, but she had been too stubborn to listen. This story illustrates how resistance and struggle can be messages rather than just obstacles to overcome. Sometimes what feels like life saying no is actually life saying no to this particular path, this particular approach, this particular timing. But when you're attached to a specific outcome, when you've decided that this is what must happen, you miss the message. You interpret the struggle as something to power through rather than as feedback to reconsider your direction. This is where the principle of holding intentions lightly becomes so important. You can have goals and work toward them while remaining open to course correction, while staying sensitive to signals that you might be on the wrong track or that timing isn't right. In nature, there is a principle called tropism, the way organisms naturally turn toward what they need. Plants grow toward light, roots grow toward water, animals migrate toward favorable conditions. There's an innate intelligence that guides organisms toward what supports their life. Humans have this same intelligence, but we often override it with our mental strategies and fears. We think our way into paths that don't actually serve us. We follow shoulds rather than genuine calling. We chase goals that are actually someone else's definition of success. The practice of natural arrival is learning to honor your own tropism, your own instinct for what serves your life, even when it doesn't make logical sense or fit others' expectations. This requires developing trust in your felt sense, your intuition, your body's wisdom. These sources of knowing often speak before your rational mind has figured things out. You might meet someone and instantly feel either drawn to them or a sense of warning before you have any logical reason for the feeling. You might walk into a situation and feel either expansion or contraction in your body before you can articulate why. You might consider an opportunity and sense either yes or no at a level deeper than pros and cons analysis. Learning to honor these subtle signals is part of maturing spiritually. But this doesn't mean ignoring your rational mind or making impulsive decisions based on every passing feeling. It means integrating different ways of knowing, allowing your intuition to inform your thinking rather than overriding it. It means checking in with your body's response before making decisions rather than only analyzing intellectually. It means honoring your deeper knowing while also using discernment to distinguish genuine intuition from fear or wishful thinking. In a monastery in ancient Korea, students were taught to make decisions by sitting with the question in meditation until clarity emerged. They weren't trying to figure out the answer. They were creating space for the answer to reveal itself. The master taught them that genuine knowing arises from stillness, not from mental churning. When you stop trying to force clarity through thinking, when you simply hold a question in open awareness, the answer often emerges naturally from a deeper place. This is very different from the modern approach of making lists of pros and cons, gathering all possible information, and trying to logically determine the best choice. Both approaches have value, but the modern approach often leaves out the dimension of wisdom that comes from sources beyond rational analysis. The meditation approach creates space for intuition, for wisdom, for sensing into what wants to unfold. When you combine thoughtful analysis with this deeper listening, you make decisions that are both intelligent and aligned with your authentic path. You consider practical realities while also honoring the subtle sense of rightness or wrongness that comes from a place beyond logic. As you live more and more according to natural arrival, you begin to trust this process. You know that you don't have to have everything figured out. You can take the next clear step without needing to see the entire staircase. You can move in a direction that feels right, even when you can't articulate exactly why. You can trust that life is guiding you toward what you need to learn and experience, even when the path isn't what you expected. There is a profound peace that comes from this trust. You're no longer carrying the burden of having to control everything, having to know everything, having to ensure specific outcomes. You become more like a child at play, fully engaged but not attached, creative but not controlling, purposeful but not rigid. This doesn't make you irresponsible or flaky. It makes you more flexible, more adaptive, more able to respond skillfully to whatever arises. In Buddhist teaching, there is a concept called skillful means. This is the ability to adapt your approach to what the situation requires, rather than rigidly applying one method to everything. Skillful means requires that you're not attached to doing things a particular way. You can adjust, improvise, try a different approach when the first one isn't working. This flexibility is only possible when you're not desperately attached to specific outcomes. When you trust that life is unfolding as it needs to unfold, you can relax your grip on your strategies and allow spontaneous wisdom to inform your actions. Think about jazz musicians improvising together. They don't plan every note in advance. They establish a basic structure and then listen deeply to each other, responding in the moment, creating something that couldn't have been predetermined. This is skillful means in action. This is the dance of alignment with what's actually happening rather than what you planned would happen. When you bring this quality to your life, you're simultaneously more creative and more responsive, more purposeful and more spontaneous, more focused and more open. The principle of natural arrival doesn't eliminate planning or intention setting, it transforms them. You plan with an open hand, knowing that reality will probably diverge from your plan, and trusting that the divergence might be guiding you towards something better. You set intentions with genuine commitment while holding space for those intentions to evolve as you learn and grow. You work toward goals with dedication while remaining unattached enough that you can recognize when it's time to adjust course. This balanced approach prevents the two extremes that create suffering. One extreme is rigid attachment to plans, becoming so fixated on a predetermined outcome that you can't adapt when circumstances change. The other extreme is having no direction at all, drifting aimlessly without purpose or focus. The middle way is having clear direction while remaining flexible about the route, having strong intentions while being unattached to specific forms, working purposefully while trusting in natural unfolding. The teaching of natural arrival ultimately points toward a profound shift in your relationship with time itself. Most people live in a constant state of temporal anxiety. They're either dwelling on the past with regret or rushing toward the future with impatience. They're rarely fully here, fully present, fully available to this moment. Natural arrival invites you to release this anxious relationship with time and instead trust in divine timing, the recognition that everything has its season and that now is always the right time for whatever is actually happening now. This doesn't mean becoming passive about your future or unconcerned about your past. It means recognizing that you can only take action in the present moment. All your power, all your choice, all your influence exists right here, right now. The past is gone and cannot be changed, though you can change your relationship to it through forgiveness, acceptance, and integration of its lessons. The future hasn't arrived and cannot be controlled, though you can influence it through present choices and actions. But the only moment you actually have is this one. When you bring your full presence to this moment, when you do what's yours to do right now with complete attention, you are living according to natural arrival. There is a famous story about a Zen master who was asked about planning for the future. He replied, "I have no plans for the future. I am completely occupied with what is happening now." The questioner was confused. "But don't you need to plan? How do you know what to do?" The master smiled. "When I need to plan, planning is what's happening now. When I need to act, action is what's happening now. When I need to rest, rest is what's happening now. I give my complete attention to whatever the present moment requires." This master understood that presence is not the absence of planning or action. Presence is the quality of full attention you bring to whatever you're doing, whether that's planning, acting, or resting. Most people are never fully present because they're always trying to get to some future moment when things will be better, different, more to their liking. They're living in the gap between what is and what they think should be. This gap creates constant low-level dissatisfaction. Even when things are going well, there's an undercurrent of yes, but, or what if that prevents full enjoyment. Natural arrival closes this gap by inviting you to be fully with what is, not because you've given up on change or improvement, but because you recognize that being fully present is the foundation for anything genuinely new to emerge. Think about an artist beginning a new painting. If the artist is constantly comparing the early stages of the work to the finished vision in their mind, they'll be in constant frustration. The painting must go through awkward, ugly, uncertain phases to get to completion. The artist must be present with each phase, must work with what's actually on the canvas rather than what they wish was there. When they can bring full attention to this brushstroke, this colour, this line, without constant judgment about whether it matches their vision, the painting can unfold organically. The artist's hands and intuition can guide the process in ways that conscious planning never could. Often the finished piece is different from the original vision, and better because it evolved through present moment responsiveness rather than rigid adherence to a predetermined plan. Your life is like this painting. It must unfold through phases that might feel awkward, uncertain, or not matching your vision. If you're constantly judging each moment by whether it matches where you think you should be, you'll be in constant struggle. But if you can be present with what is, can work with the actual reality you're in rather than the reality you wish you were in, can trust the process of organic unfolding, your life will surprise you with beauty and meaning that you couldn't have planned or forced. In Buddhist teaching, there is a meditation practice of noting here and now with each breath. You breathe in and silently note here. You breathe out and note now. This simple practice brings you back again and again to the only moment that exists, the only place you actually are. It counters the mind's habit of time traveling into past regrets or future anxieties. When you anchor in here and now, you discover that this moment, just as it is actually okay, even if it contains difficulty or discomfort. You can be with it. Even if it's not how you'd prefer things to be, you can meet it with presence rather than resistance. This practice of presencing becomes the foundation for natural arrival. When you're here now, you're available to receive what this moment is offering. You're not so caught in stories about the past or fantasies about the future that you miss the actual opportunities, connections, and insights that are available right here. You become like good soil, receptive to whatever seeds life is planting. Some of those seeds will grow into exactly what you hoped for. Some will grow into something different. Some won't grow at all. But your receptivity, your presence, your openness is what allows anything to take root. There was once a scholar who spent his entire life studying ancient texts about enlightenment. He memorized scriptures, debated philosophy, wrote commentaries, but he never experienced the liberation the texts described. One day, exhausted from his studies, he went for a walk in nature. As he stood by a stream, watching water flow over rocks, smelling flowers blooming along the bank, feeling sunlight on his skin, something shifted. For the first time in decades, he was fully present, not thinking about enlightenment, but simply experiencing this moment. And in that presence, he understood what all the texts had been pointing toward. It wasn't something to achieve in the future. It was the fullness of being here now without the mental commentary that usually obscures immediate experience. This is the secret that natural arrival reveals. What you're seeking is not in the future. It's here, obscured by your focus on there and then. Peace is not something you achieve later after getting everything in order. It's available now when you stop demanding that this moment be different. Love is not something you find out there with the right person. It's the quality of open-heartedness you bring to this interaction right now. Fulfillment is not something that arrives when you finally accomplish your goals. It's the sense of meaning you create by engaging fully with whatever you're doing in this moment. This doesn't mean you have no aspirations, or that you accept harmful situations without working to change them. It means you recognize that the future you're building is being constructed from the quality of presence you bring to each moment. When you're fully present, your actions are more skillful, your decisions are wiser, your connections are more authentic. The future that emerges from this kind of presence is naturally more aligned with your deepest values than any future you could force through anxious control. As you integrate this understanding more deeply, you'll notice that your relationship with waiting changes. Waiting stops feeling like dead time, like nothing happening, like wasted opportunity. Waiting becomes its own kind of activity, a spacious allowing where things are ripening, developing, preparing to emerge. You learn that some things simply cannot be rushed, and that trying to rush them actually delays or damages the outcome. You develop patience, not as passive resignation, but as active trust in the timing of things. In nature, there are countless examples of this principle. A seed must spend time underground before sprouting. A caterpillar must spend time in the cocoon before emerging as a butterfly. Fruit must spend time on the tree ripening before it's ready to eat. These waiting periods aren't optional. They're essential to the process of transformation. Your life includes similar necessary waiting periods where things are happening beneath the surface, this, even though nothing appears to be happening visibly. Learning to trust these fallow times, these periods of incubation, is part of maturing spiritually. There is a practice in some traditions of blessing the waiting, of treating the time between intention and manifestation as sacred rather than as a frustrating delay. During this time, you're not just sitting around passively. You're preparing internally, developing capacities you'll need, releasing what needs to be released, becoming the person who is ready to receive what's coming. This reframe transforms waiting from something to endure into something to engage with actively. Think about pregnancy. The 9 months of gestation aren't just empty waiting time before the real event of birth. During those 9 months, an incredible amount is happening. A single cell is developing into a complex organism. The mother's body is transforming to support this process. Preparations are being made physically, emotionally, mentally. The waiting is full of activity, even though it's mostly invisible. When you're waiting for something to manifest in your life, something similar is occurring. You and the situation are being prepared for each other. Things are aligning beneath the surface. The timing is working itself out through processes you cannot see or control. As we come to the completion of this exploration, the teaching of natural arrival reveals itself as both incredibly simple and profoundly deep. At its surface, it's a practical wisdom about releasing control and trusting life's unfolding. At its depth, it's a spiritual truth about the fundamental nature of reality and your place within it. You are not separate from life, trying to extract what you need from a reluctant universe. You are an expression of life itself, and what's meant for you is being drawn toward you by the same intelligence that draws roots toward water and flowers toward light. This trust in natural arrival is ultimately trust in life itself, trust that you live in a universe that is fundamentally benevolent, fundamentally intelligent, fundamentally oriented toward growth and evolution and the highest good. This doesn't mean nothing bad ever happens. It means that even difficult experiences serve a larger purpose, contribute to your development, prepare you for what's coming. It means that what appears to be a setback might be setting you up for something you cannot yet see. It means that delays, obstacles, and detours might be precisely what you need, even when you cannot understand why. There was once a traveller who was desperate to reach a distant city by a particular date. He had bought a ticket for a ship that would depart at dawn, but on the morning of departure, his carriage broke down on the way to the port. Despite his frantic efforts, he arrived just in time to see his ship leaving without him. He was devastated, certain that this missed opportunity would ruin his plans. But later that day, news arrived that the ship had encountered a terrible storm and sank with all passengers lost. The delay that had seemed catastrophic had actually saved his life. This story, told in various forms across cultures, points to the mystery that you cannot judge any event in isolation. You cannot know what you're being saved from or prepared for when something doesn't go according to your plan. This recognition invites a profound humility. You must admit that you don't know best, that your perspective is limited, that what you think you want might not serve you, that reality might be wiser than your preferences. This admission is not defeat, but liberation. When you release the burden of having to know best, having to control everything, having to ensure specific outcomes, you free enormous energy for living more fully, loving more openly, creating more authentically. The spiritual path is often described as a journey from head to heart, from thinking to being, from controlling to allowing. Natural arrival is a teaching that guides this journey. Each time you practice releasing control, each time you trust rather than force, each time you allow rather than insist, you take a step from head to heart. You move from the small self that thinks it's in charge to the true self that knows it's part of something infinitely larger and more intelligent. This larger self, what Buddhist teachings call your Buddha nature, is not something you need to acquire or achieve. It's what you are beneath all the conditioning, all the fear, all the grasping. It's your original face, your essential nature, the consciousness that was there before you learned to identify as a separate self. The practice of natural arrival gradually dissolves the artificial boundaries between you and life, revealing that you and life are one seamless flow. There is no separate you trying to get things from a separate reality. There is only life living itself through countless forms, and you are one of those forms. When this recognition deepens from intellectual understanding into lived experience, everything changes. You still have preferences, still make choices, still take action, but the quality of your engagement transforms. There's less grasping, less fear, less desperate need. There's more ease, more flow, more trust. You move through life like a dancer rather than a warrior, responding rather than controlling, collaborating with reality rather than trying to dominate it. In the end, the teaching of natural arrival is an invitation to come home to yourself, to reality, to the present moment. It's an invitation to stop the exhausting struggle of trying to force life to match your will and instead discover the grace of aligning your will with life. It's an invitation to trust that you are held, that you are guided, that you are part of an intelligence so vast and so loving that it can be trusted absolutely, even when you cannot understand its methods or timeline. This trust is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you cultivate through practice, through experience, through choosing again and again to let go and see what happens. Each time you choose trust and discover that you were held, your capacity for trust deepens. Each time you release control and find that things work out anyway, your faith in natural unfolding strengthens. Each time you let go of forcing and experience what arrives naturally, you gather evidence that life can be trusted. And so the practice continues day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. You notice when you're grasping and practice opening your hand. You notice when you're forcing and practice allowing. You notice when you're resisting what is and practice acceptance. You notice when you're lost in past or future and practice presence. Gradually, imperceptibly, these practices transform you from someone who is constantly fighting life into someone who is dancing with it. The beauty of this path is that you can begin right now, right here, with whatever is present in this moment. You don't need to wait until conditions are perfect or until you've figured everything out. You can take a breath and release control of just this one moment. You can soften your grip on just this one preference. You can trust the unfolding of just this one situation, and then the next moment you can choose again. This is how transformation happens, not through one dramatic change, but through countless small choices that gradually rewire your relationship with reality. As you go forward from this exploration, carry with you the understanding that what's meant for you will not miss you. You don't have to chase it, force it, manipulate circumstances to make it happen. You can relax, trust, allow. You can do your part with full commitment while releasing outcomes to forces wiser than your planning mind. You can live with an open hand and an open heart, available to receive whatever life is offering, trusting that what arrives is exactly what you need for your particular journey. This is not passive resignation, but active faith. This is not giving up, but aligning with a deeper current. This is not losing yourself, but finding your true self, the self that has always been one with the intelligence that moves through all things. In this alignment, you discover that you don't need to force life to be good because life is already fundamentally good, already working for your highest welfare, already guiding you toward your greatest flourishing. May you find the courage to release what you cannot control. May you discover the peace that comes from trusting natural unfolding. May you experience the grace of receiving what's meant for you exactly when you're ready to receive it. May you live with an open heart, knowing that you are held by forces of love and wisdom far greater than you can comprehend. This is the promise of natural arrival. This is the gift of detachment. This is the freedom that comes from trusting life itself. And so the teaching completes itself, not with a dramatic conclusion, but with an invitation into ongoing practice. Each day offers fresh opportunities to trust rather than control, to allow rather than force, to receive rather than grasp. Each moment is another chance to align with the natural intelligence that moves through all things. Each breath is a reminder that you are already part of the flow, already held, already home. If it's meant for you, it will arrive naturally. Trust this, live this, become this, and discover the profound peace that has been waiting beneath all your striving, the peace that is your birthright, your nature, your truth.